So, TFT has a new patch coming out tomorrow, patch 10.13. Again, I hate this numbering convention. I disastrously hate it because we had 10.9 and then we had 10.10. It's wrong. But back on point. We'll come back to the highlights. So I would say with this patch, there's been mostly minor changes. There is one fairly significant change, and I think it might actually have an impact on the game, but we'll see, and we'll get to that. So to start off, ranked. If you are a master and above, you can no longer queue with multiple people. You can only solo queue. This kind of became a pretty big deal in the community about a week ago. There's been a lot of targeting of people who have, win trading? Yeah, been win trading. So they queue with a whole bunch of fake accounts and then just intentionally grief with the off accounts while winning with their main account. Kind of messes up the ranked experience, so you can no longer queue with multiple people outside of Master. I'm going to be honest, if you're queuing as a group, you probably should just go to normal battle. I'm going to be honest. I'm not a big fan of group queue and ranked, especially in a solo game like this. Now, if the game had some sort of multiplayer component to it, then I'd be fine with it, but it really doesn't. Some system changes. New galaxies. So, we have the new binary scar. So, in binary star, you can only put 2 items on a single champion. So, you can't, triple stack DPS carry anymore. That's something that's pretty common on a handful of champions that have built-in defensive capabilities, is to just stack them with offensive items. Won't be able to do that in this galaxy, so you're going to have to work on getting a second and maybe even a third carry at times. To coincide with this, Medium Legends is going away. I'm pretty glad about this. I'm not the biggest fan of Medium Legends. I think it gives people who are playing poorly more excuses to continue playing poorly in the off chance they get some random high roll. Some miscellaneous changes. Minimum number of items that can drop in the game is increased by 1. So if you didn't know, there's a minimum amount of item drops you can get, and that was 11. 11's kind of an awkward number to have minimal number of drops of, because that means you can only make 5 complete items, rather than everyone else who gets at least 12 and makes 6 complete items. That can be a pretty big difference, especially when you usually make your initial item, and your initial item's hyper utility based. Then you have to find 2 more items to prep up your DPS, another item to defend your DPS, and that leaves you with one last item to put on a frontliner. Then you're getting to the point where you get very, very item dependent. It can get pretty rough. So this is a pretty good change. I don't think it's going to impact the game too much. It's just going to prevent people from low rolling less often. It's going to stop people from low rolling less often. That's not right either. Whatever. You guys know what I'm trying to say. Trait changes. So this is the big one. Battlecast is crap. And everybody knew Battlecast was crap. I've basically seen Battlecast be successful once in how many games have I played? I probably played about 30 games on this patch. I've seen Battlecast be useful once. And essentially that was when you got up to 4 Battlecasts, because the 4 Battlecasts is the 160. 70 is meaningless number. You have to get 10 autos or be hit 10 times to get 70. That doesn't do anything. 160, you might be able to do something with. 325 is good, but you're running 6 Battlecasts that have no other synergies. So, why is this relevant? We'll kind of go over this later, because this really isn't all that's changing with Battlecast. There's some significant other changes that are going on with Battlecast that we'll get into. Just note, 6 and 8 go up big. They big numbers. 480 is not a small number. That big number. So we'll get back to Battlecast, because I want to talk about Battlecast as a whole rather than just this adjustment. Blademaster. Blademaster 6 is very, 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 very good. So, tiny nerf to Blademaster 6. Blaster. Apparently no one plays Blaster 4 because there's no reason to play Blaster 4, so they're buffing Blaster 4. Again, there's really no reason to play Blaster 4 ever. The 3 extra attacks you get is, incredibly worthwhile. The 6 The additional 3, not really worth losing another synergy out. So this shouldn't change anything. Cybernetic. Cybernetic is a very consistent build. I was always curious why they increased I believe they increased the AD on Cybers when they moved into 10.12, and I've been kind of curious about that. I don't really know why, but essentially they're reverting that because Cyber is an incredibly consistent build. Darkstar. So Darkstar is essentially underplayed. I say underplayed and not underpowered because I think there was a lot of like under the radar talk that Darkstar is actually not that bad, just nobody kind of plays it. Mostly because they don't really understand a good build that it'll work with, and that there are other builds that are probably just a little bit better anyway. So, across the board, outside of Darkstar too, because a lot of builds just flex Darkstar because it's worthwhile to do so. Darkstar 4 through 8 are getting a buff, so 4, 6, and 8 going up. Will this change anything? I don't know. I'm kind of the opinion, as I stated, that Darkstar is underplayed. I think there are good Darkstar builds out there that no one's actually playing, particularly with a Shaco carry. I think Shaco is a very undervalued champion without a home right now. I think with these changes, you might see some people experimenting with Darkstar and find out that 4 and 6 Darkstar is actually pretty good. And those people are probably going to develop like a Darkstar Infiltrator build or something like that that works very well. So I do look for a Darkstar, some Darkstar builds in the next patch. Infiltrator attack speed buff, kind of similar to Darkstar. Very few people are playing Infiltrator after Mech kind of got dishonored and murdered, kind of ish. Mech's still good, it's just not great. Infiltrator basically went without a home, which was interesting because Infiltrator kind of got... So here's the thing with Infiltrator. Infiltrator kind of got a buff in the last patch in that Echo is way better than he was before. Echo is like legitimately really good. But you lost Kha'Zix, who was really good in the early game, and you could hyper roll him and Void and throw in another Infiltrator, and that was another thing you could do with Infiltrators. Kha'Zix is gone, and he was replaced with mildly not very good Nocturne. So running 4 Infiltrator often right now requires a Spat and a Zed that's actually good. There are better builds to play Zed in. The Infiltrator is just kind of at a spot where you're usually just going to play 2 rather than 4. So I don't really have much to say here, but it should be noted this is actually a pretty good buff for Infiltrator 4. Don't be surprised if you see some Infiltrator 4. I just don't think that Infiltrator's in a great spot to find really good homes. Now, again, with the Darkstar buff, there's a universe where you could see some crazy Darkstar Infiltrator build. I just don't know where it is. Mystic 4 is getting a nerf. Not surprising. Mystic 4 is pretty good and pretty kind of this... Mystic 4 is probably not supposed to be a consistent build that people are playing. And because so many people are playing Vanguard Mystics, it's kind of putting a damper on Sorcerer. So that's probably more what this is supposed to be touching. I don't think it's enough to really do anything. But we'll see. Champion changes. So I was touching this with the Battlecast changes, but pretty much all the Battlecast champions are getting a buff in some way. Pretty much all of them. Most notably, Aioli. So Aioli, in the early game, is not very good. Just kind of a placeholder if you want Brawler 2. Now, Aioli does a lot of stuff. Additional HP buff. Additional defense stealing. Increased defense stealing duration. This is actually a big one. This is a 50% increase on the duration of that defense steal. Like, this is basically Leona alt good in the early game. Nocturne changes. Nocturne gets an attack speed buff because Nocturne doesn't do anything outside of stop something from attacking. And a slight buff to Nocturne 3, which, whatever. Xayah is also getting a buff because they nerfed Xayah a bunch of times because Shredder was too powerful, and now Shredder's not powerful, so we can undo that and make Xayah the early game carry she's supposed to be. Darius gets huge buffs. So, this one's a little interesting. So, the explanation for Darius being so good, or at least why they're trying to make Darius so good, is that because they got rid of Kassadin, it is now much harder to trigger Mana Reaver. What they mean by that is the other two Mana Reavers are a tier 4 unit in, oh shoot, my mind, Aurelia, and a tier 5 unit in Thresh. So you have to be carrying Darius through the mid game and into the late game where you can find an Aurelia or a Thresh. I don't think a lot of people are actually doing that. Like, Mana Reaver essentially has become a wasted trait on Darius. So, to return for that, he's getting a bunch of buffs. I'm iffy on this, because it's not going to put Darius in a place where you play him in standard builds. You're basically just going to play him to get early Space Pirate and get some early gold off Space Pirate junk. But Darius is also the center of a very explosive build in Space Jam. And if you didn't notice, they did buff the damage on his ult, which makes me kind of worried that they might make Space Jam a little too powerful. So I've got my eye on this one. I really don't think it was necessary, but they want him to be a little more played. I think he's not played pretty much for the reasons they said he's not played, but that buffing him does not really change that problem. Kog'Maw, like all the other Battlecasts, Kog'Maw getting massive buffs. Like, pretty significant buffs here. An extra 50 HP, which is relevant when he gets tagged by an infiltrator in the early game and instantly dies to said infiltrator. One less auto attack to go into his ult, which is like rapid fire mode. And so this is, I mentally do math on this one. This is probably going from 7% to 8%, actually a pretty big deal. That's a lot less attacks using Barrage that you have to do to kill something. So let's mentally do math while streaming and on a video again. So let's actually here's what we'll do. We'll get out. Yeah, we're smart. We're smart. We can get out the calculator and do math. Calculator open. Calculator open. Voop. Okay. So, the damage is percentage based. So it starts from 100. If we're doing 8% each time, that's 12.5 attacks, so 13 attacks. On the other hand, if we're doing 7, that is 15 attacks. So it is 2 less attacks to kill something. Now, don't forget, Kog'Maw increases his attack speed when he does this. So this is actually pretty significant less number of attacks it's going to take to kill something. So I view this as a pretty significant buff, and I want to actually talk about Kog'Maw a bit more, Kog'Maw and Battlecast overall, when we get near the end of this video. Nautilus. Nautilus is one of the best vanguards in the game. I'm actually going to outright say it. Nautilus and Wukong are probably the 2 best vanguards in the game right now. A lot of people think Jace is really good. I think Nautilus might actually be better than Jace. Why do I think that? Because this stun duration is insanity. I have no idea why this stun duration is AoE and this long. At all. Combined with the fact that he is Astro, and you can lower the total mana count to 90, is absurd. These changes are very warranted. I agree wholeheartedly with these changes. And still think Nautilus is one of the best vanguards in the game right now. Tier 3 champions. Bard cast time reduced significantly. So, apparently it takes forever for a Bard to cast a spell to summon a Meep. So, if you did stack him with all of this stuff to regen mana, or go up to Astro Infinity and get him to 3-star, he basically took longer to cast his ult than he did to build mana to cast his ult. So, they reduced the cast time to make Bard a little more playable. Cassiopeia poison duration increased from 12 seconds to 14 seconds. What this is not is a DPS change. Well, actually, this is a DPS change in that it decreases the DPS because it is the same amount of damage being dealt over an increased period of time. So it now takes 12 seconds to deal the damage instead of 4. I should just throw this video away. It now takes 14 seconds to deal this damage instead of 12. So this is a straight nerf to Cassiopeia. Probably a fine change. I think Vanguard Mystic is kind of a plague on like gold through platinum. I think once you get into Master, that build's not very good. But until you get to Master, you'll see this build every game. Jace, they buffed Jace a bunch of times, and now they're nerfing him because he gets played in all these Vanguard builds. Pretty simple stuff. Master Yi. I don't know if you knew this, but Master Yi gets a lot of talk for being the carry in what is the best build in the game. I don't really know if I agree with that statement. But a lot of people, particularly people who play at the top tier of the game, say that Six Blade Master is the best build in the game. Again, I don't really know if I agree with that statement, and it most certainly is not true in the lower tiers of the game where people who play it just kind of get stomped out of the lobby. Probably because they don't know how to play it, is what it's most likely because. But a lot of that's because Master Yi at 3-star deals shitloads of true damage. It's a lot of true damage. So they're cutting down the true damage by a tiny bit. Fair change. Tier 4 champions. Fizz. So Fizz ended up in a weird spot. It turns out Fizz is really good to just kind of play on his own. Who knew? Apparently his ult is really good. Who knew? So, bringing down his mana a bit. No issue here. So, this one I want to talk a little bit about, because I actually did this a couple days ago. Nar 3 apparently is statistically one of the worst Tier 4 champions at 3-star in the game. I didn't know that, man. That said, I have made Nar 3. I was underwhelmed when I made Nar 3. I still won the game, because I made Nar 3. But he was not very good. So, they're buffing his HP on ult, so he gets an extra 4,000 instead of 250, or 2.5k. So that's a tiny, a little bit of a difference. Instead of doubling, we go just triple it. In fact, more than triple it. Triple HP increase. Also gets an AD buff at 3-star. In return, the ult stun duration goes down to 1.5 seconds. The ult has a pretty significant AoE to it. It reminds me a lot of Malphite, but with Malphite you could do more obnoxious things, but people didn't really like Malphite because he was stunning everything everywhere with Mage Cap. This is pretty similar to that, so I think this is probably a fine change. Jinx being one of 2 AD carries, well, 3 AD carries in the game, and unless you're playing Cybers or unless you're playing Snipers, you're playing Jinx and AD. Like, there really are very, very few AD builds in the game that don't rely on Jinx. So they're kind of nerfing Jinx in that when she gets excited, shooting rockets everywhere, the attack speed's not going to be as significantly increased as it was before. I understand Jinx gets a lot of play in a wide variety of builds. I just don't really know if this was really necessary to do. I don't think those builds that were running Jinx before have good replacements for Jinx. And I think with the change that has happened with Battlecast, you might actually see more Jinx play. So, we'll see. Riven ult. So Riven ult gives a shield. They are nerfing that shield at 1-star and 2-star because if you put a red cap on her, she can occasionally become completely unkillable. Which is fair to say. That said, I think sorcerer builds are kind of garbage, so I don't actually think this is that meaningful. Teemo. I love Teemo. He's so annoying. Such a little dirtbag. I love him. So they are nerfing the damage Teemo does at 3-star. It doesn't matter. This just kills things anyway, so that really doesn't matter. But more importantly, the slow duration goes from 4 seconds to 3 seconds. I've made my complaints that the Teemo slows too hard. They went the other way, and that the duration was too long. It's fair enough, but I think the point was the slow is too slow, in my opinion. It's my realm. Tier 5 changes. 2-star Echo is incredibly strong and murders things, especially things that have QSS on them. So they're lowering the damage that Echo does at 2-star. Thresh total mana increasing to 90. That hopefully will stop some of the complaints about Urgot being ridiculous, because very few people actually just put Urgot in their comp. They have Thresh, and Thresh pulls in Urgot. So my hope is that this lessens the oppression that is Thresh in some games, of Thresh pulling Urgot. Item changes. Bloodthirster and Hextech Gunblade increase from 40%. The healing on them increases from 40% to 45%. These are kind of irrelevant because there are no builds that actually really use them, these items right now. It's mostly because the meta has a bunch of units that one-shot things, or near one-shot things, so healing isn't really that relevant. That's my opinion. If these items want to be relevant, you have to have less one-shotting champions. Crit Gauntlet damage bonus. There was some fuzzy math numbers about using this with IE that make it so that this does a particular number of percentage damage. I don't remember them. Jewel Gauntlet is better now, and I'm going to point out that Death Cap is almost always the item you're going to go for instead. Unless you have an IE, which is weird, because you could have made Death Cap. Why not just make Death Cap? Static Shiv buff. Static Shiv's a weird item in that it really doesn't have a lot of champions you can put it on right now. That said, you could probably put it on Kog'Maw now that Kog'Maw is actually not terrible. I don't know what that does. Zerat Portal. There was something funky with Zerat Portal that I don't remember that caused it to get a buff. I have no idea what that was. I have honestly forgotten. But Zerat Portal gets a buff. Some minor changes. Yeah. Whoever figured this one out, man, that's like magical to me. I can't imagine any situation where I would have learned that this was a bug. Also, if you have videos of this one where Kog'Maw's attacks became Trap Claw procs, I want to see them because that was probably freaking hilarious. Actually saw this happen a while ago. This actually happened in a tournament game where a Zephyr unit, I believe, got hit with a Jace ult, and I was like, huh, that was interesting. So it's good to know that this is getting fixed, because this could be awkward city in some builds. And then some mobile corner changes. So I want to go back. Let's go back to the highlights. So what exactly has changed in this next patch? What is going to be good? So the big thing was nearly every Battlecast unit was getting a buff. Significant Battlecast buffs across the board. So my thought when I saw that was, oh, you don't have to play Blaster Brawler anymore. You can play Battlecast Brawler. Battlecast Brawler Blaster. Battlecast Blaster. Battlecast Blaster. So then I opened up some apps to kind of experiment of what these builds would look like, and then I realized you could actually still do Blaster Brawler and have 4 Battlecasts with 1 Battlecast spat. That's interesting. That seems pretty good. What would it be? It would literally just be all the Brawlers, Jinx, and 3 Battlecasts, including Kog'Maw, and a Battlecast spat on Jinx. That seems very, very, very good. That seems incredibly good. You even have slots left over because you have Ioli, who is a Battlecast and a Brawler. So that's only, what, 7 slots? So you have an extra slot open to put in another champion. That's kind of terrifying to me. I think Battlecast actually will be a build. I'm not 100% sure what it will look like, but that was my first stab at it, was you can basically do Blaster Brawlers, put a Battlecast spat on Jinx, and have all the Blaster Brawlers you need. as long as you include 3 Battlecast champions. So you would include Kog'Maw, you'd include Aioli, you'd have a Battlecast spat on Jinx, and then you'd have one other. I'm not quite sure. I'm assuming Urgot. Urgot would make the most sense. Or you can have Cassiopeia and add in another Mystic and have Mystic 2 in your build. All of these things sound like good ideas to me. So, like I said, I suspect Battlecast will be a lot better, especially in like the mid game if you can get a Battlecast 6 off, which would be awkward because that would require an Urgot. But we'll see on that. Other things, I think we might see some static Shiv play with Kog'Maw. I think the change to Kog'Maw and probably the buff to Xayah, you might see some static Shiv play come back. I don't think it will be as ridiculous as Ranger was in set 2, where you could put it on Ashe and Ashe would just kind of delete things, like entire compositions when she ulted with Shiv. But it should, I actually do think we will see some play with it. What I don't think we'll see play with is any of these, because nothing really changed here. I also think we'll see some more infiltrators. I don't exactly know what it'll look like. I think it'll probably be like a Dark Star with 2 to 4 infiltrators. The big thing with infiltrators is that you still need a front line to distract things while your infiltrators are smashing the back line. It very well could be that we just go back to Mech Infiltrator. That could very well be possible. I don't think really anything happened to Mech Infiltrator outside of Nocturne's existence. So, we'll see. I'll go ahead and end the video at that. Hey, kept it under a half hour. Nicely done, me. And get into some games. So, see you around.